talk with your pass, talk with your actions, talk with your effort and your attitude and your toughness every single play. I didn't feel that we did that collectively as a football team.
The Temple Owls played their first game of the season and came out with an ugly win against Akron, sparked by a second-half comeback.
We'll also take a look at Temple's Week 2 matchup against Rutgers, who dominated in its first game against Northwestern.
Edition of Inside the Nest for 2023.
And it's live, all starting right now. Hello and welcome into the first full edition of Inside the Nest in 2023. He's Jake Gable and I'm Meg Doyle. Today we have a jam-packed show starting with a recap of Temple's rough season opener against Akron,
along with a look at Temple's next matchup against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and a look around the rest of the American Athletic Conference. Lots of new teams on the schedule this year, but first, let's focus on the Zips from Akron, making a trip to South Philly.
The Owls stormed the Link for their season opener on Saturday and left with the win, but it wasn't pretty and it wasn't easy.
The Owls came in as 10-point favorites, and while they picked up a W in the win column, Temple found itself trailing for most of the game.
The Owls were at home at the Link for their season opener against Akron. The game gets off to a rocky start when Akron's quarterback DJ Irons fakes a run and throws a jump pass for a 77-yard touchdown. Temple had a rough first quarter, but finally gets a rhythm on E.J. Warner's fifth drive, going 5 for 5 for 60 yards. The Owls finished the possession with a 1-yard rushing touchdown. However, Temple lacked consistency in this first half, and the Zips quickly retook their lead with a 2-yard touchdown run by quarterback Taj Bullock. Temple defense struggled, and in the last 2 minutes of the half, Akron extended the lead with a 14-yard touchdown pass, making the score 21-7.
Temple gets a field goal at the end of the second half to make it a 21-10 game. Temple gets the ball back at the start of the third quarter, and E.J. Warner completes a pass to Ahmad Anderson over the middle for a 28-yard gain after fighting through some contact. That play set up a red zone opportunity for the Owls, and they converted with a swing pass to Edward Sadie on the left side. Temple tries to go for two, but fails to convert, making it a 21-16 game. Later in the fourth quarter, here comes Temple again. This time it's David Martin Robinson getting in on the action for a 30-yard catch. That leads to some deja vu. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Edward Sadie again catches a touchdown pass on the left side. Temple goes for two again, and this time they convert. Martin Robinson again coming up big with a catch. The Owls' defense shuts out the Zips in the second half, and this Tywan Francis interception seals it. Temple wins their first Week 1 game since 2019. Owls win it 24-21. Taking a look at the box score from the game, Temple got all of its offense done through the passing game. Warner completed 28 of his 49 attempts and 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. Normally doing his work on the ground, Edward Sadie racked up the first 2 receiving touchdowns of his career. Colorado State transfer Dante Wright, in his Temple debut, led the team in receiving. Meanwhile, for Akron, quarterback DJ Irons did his best to keep up with Warner, throwing for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, running back Lorenzo Lingard scored on the second play of the game, but was not heard from again.
While the Owls got the win, they still have a long way to go if they want to make some noise in the AAC.
2 new single-digit players, quarterback E.J. Warner and linebacker Yvonne Rigby, spoke about Game 1, the good and the bad.
Yeah, it was a big one. Obviously, we were stalling. Had a couple of 3-and-outs. So just want to end it off right, get some momentum going into halftime. Came out on a 2-minute, made some completions, hit a big one to Sadie. Just got to roll on, and then I think that carried over into the second half, obviously. Coming back, get some unanswered points, so it was big for us.
You looked at the average today.
Yeah, I mean, Dante obviously came in here. This offseason has been huge for us from day one. I learned the playbook fast, been on the field for us, has some good speed, good hands. So it's been good for us, but also just a great person to have in the locker room, great person to have in the receiver room. He's been mature ever since he's been here and help lead and help do his job. So it's big for him to go out there and finally make some plays for us and show what he can do to the Temple fans. Yeah, I mean, you never really know. Game one coming out, they can do anything, and you're not really sure what to expect. But my job at the end of the day, the quarterback, is just to know what to do versus every single look we can get, no matter what, whether it's what they showed last year, whether it's new. So I kind of have a plan before every single snap, make sure I can simplify things and know where my eyes need to go. So it wasn't really too big of an adjustment. Obviously, got a little more comfortable as I saw some different things and showed some different things in that first half that could carry over to the second half.
Oh, it means amazing. It was just going into the second, the locker room after the first half, just establishing that all this work that we put in is not for no reason. We're not doing it in vain. We got to come out here and really shine. So that's really one thing. That's an emphasis that we made in the locker room. And to come out there and do that as defense says a lot.
Well, sorry about the technical difficulties, but that was Yvonne Rigby talking about the switch in mindset of the defense going into that second half. The defense allowed Akron to score 21 points in the first half to not allowing any points in the second half. They limited the Zips to only 41 total yards in the third and fourth quarters combined. There seemed to have been some miscommunications between the defensive line, which led to such a rocky first half. Right off the bat, within the first minute, Akron got a 77-yard touchdown. There was definitely some first half jitters, but the Owls snapped out of it going into that second half.
Not only did the defense pick it up in the second half, but so did the offense. After 4 3-and-outs in the first half, the Owls ended the half on a positive note with a 2-minute drill that led to a field goal. Then in the second half, the offense started to look in sync and outscoring Akron 14-0 after halftime.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jake. One person who stood out to me on the offense is Dante Wright. Wright had 71 receiving yards, which were the most by a Temple wide receiver in his debut as an Owl since Bruce Gordon in 2005. You also heard what EJ was saying in the post-game press conference. He's not only a great player on the field, but also in the locker room. That just goes to show what type of all-around athlete he is.
Yeah, people have been raging about EJ Warner's leadership for just being a sophomore. And Dante Wright, he was the biggest surprise for me in a good way. He was really good in this game, and him and EJ Warner had an immediate connection. You would have thought that the two had been playing together for years. He really stepped up in the absence of Ian Stewart, who was ruled out due to injury. With that being said, I do have to get a little critical. The passing game was really good for the offense, but the running game really never got going. There was a lot of struggles. They had just 61 yards rushing total in the game. That is not going to win you many ball games, and is why against Akron, that came down to the wire.
Absolutely, especially heading into this next game against Rutgers, they will really have their work cut out for them. Rutgers only allowed 12 yards and 7 points against Northwestern. That really goes to show that we have a long way to go for this next game. We're now sending it over to Sam at Edberg Olsen Hall to fill us in more about what the defense is up to. Hey, Sam.
Thanks, guys. This game was not supposed to be as close as it was. Although the Owls escaped with the victory, there was an obvious lack of big plays in the first half. But as the defense stepped onto the field for the second half, you could tell that the Owls were ready to make some changes to switch momentum. Halfway through the home opener against Akron, Temple's defense had let up 21 points, including a touchdown in the very first minute of its 2023 season. But as the Owls took the field for the second half, the message was clear, and it came from the team's second-year head coach.
You know, if you're going to say you're going to do something, then we need to be a football team that does it. You know, we just can't be about talk.
This halftime talk turned into action. The Owls changed a lackluster and very uneven first half into a much stronger second half. especially on defense. Temple held Akron to only 41 total yards in the second half, compared to the 238 yards in the first half. The defensive team that entered the fourth quarter looked completely different to the one that started this game. Just in the fourth quarter alone, Temple had 2 sacks and an interception. Tywan Francis was the one responsible for that interception, starting in his first game as a Temple Owl after transferring in from Colorado State.
There's a bunch of single digits over there responsible for the energy and the passion of that defense, you know, and I think that that's something that picked up as we walked out of the locker room, and they just kind of took on the mindset that, you know, they're going to put the game on their back.
Temple cannot afford to play 2 quarters of good football against a strong team like Rutgers. With a win against the Scarlet Knights, the Owls will advance to 2-0 for the first time since 2019. This change of momentum in the second half included Temple's first turnover since November 2022 versus Houston. The defense found its rhythm as 3 players, including Jordan McGee and Tywan Francis, had at least 5 total tackles. Yvonne D. Rigby had 14 of those tackles. 11 of them were solo tackles, which is a career high for him. And as announced Monday afternoon, after his impressive and impactful performance on Saturday against Akron, Rigby was named the AAC Defensive Player of the Week. That's all from me for now. Reporting live from Edberg Olson, I'm Sam Cavone. Megan Jake, back to you on the desk.
Thanks, Sam. It's now time to take a deeper look at some of the key plays that helped secure Temple's win on Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely. And for my first play I want to break down today, it's going to be Tywan Francis's interception in the last 2 minutes of the game. You watch him here. Stop it right there. He is in perfect position right in front of Bobby Golden to get that interception. Go ahead and play it. Let's watch it back one more time. You're going to see him right from the snap. He is locked in and he is perfectly lined up with the run to get in front of that ball.
Now I'm going to take an offensive play. We're going to stop it really early. This is the Edward Sadie touchdown pass, but I want you to look at these 2 receivers. That's David Martin Robinson and Dante Wright. They are going to completely clear out the area for Edward Sadie to get wide open. Go ahead and play it. You watch them take out those guys. Edward Sadie has one-on-one, and he beats his man to the end zone. We'll watch it one more time. Make sure to watch those receivers again because they really make the play. It's Edward Sadie and 1 defender. He makes a miss, and that's a score. We're coming on to our first break, and on the other side, we will check in with Stan Drayton on the topics he spoke about during his weekly news conference on Monday.
It includes thoughts on the season opening win, and Drayton also looks ahead to one of the tougher games on Temple's schedule, that road matchup at Rutgers. Don't go anywhere. We will be back in 90 seconds. Welcome back. It is Stan Drayton's second season coaching the Owls, and he got his first Week 1 win of his career with Temple.
Here is part 1 of our 2-part look at Drayton's weekly talk. He touches on that halftime motivational speech, the run game, and he talks about Rutgers.
You know, it was right for the moment, you know, and I try to stay in the moment and, you know, get a good feel for the team. The last thing you want to do is, you know, be emotional instead of being intentional with your message, right? You know, I was not trying to be impulsive. I was trying to give our team exactly what they needed in that moment, you know, and, you know, every game's different, right? I knew our guys were out there trying to do the right thing. You know, I know that there was some evaluating and some hesitation going on, you know, which I expect a little bit of that game 1, you know, but when you got some guys who have been battle tested, you know, that have been through some things, you know, when you see that happening out of those, your best players, then it's time to address them, you know, and they received it well, and, you know, we just moved on. It wasn't like it was a special speech, but it was just a little bit of fuel to the fire that was already lit, and we just had to get better performance out of them in the second half, and they went out there and did it. So we got to worry about us, right? We got to go out there and try to run the ball to the best of our ability and And you know, there's definitely room for improvement from a fundamental and technique standpoint up front. Some guys getting their feet wet for the first time up front. I thought they did, you know, fairly well considering. Obviously, Rutgers on the offensive side of the ball does a great job of running the ball, right? So if their defense is seeing that every day in practice leading up to this football game, you expect them to be good running, you know, stopping the run on defense. So, I mean, complimentary football on their part, you know, we just have to be ready for it. If you ask me if I had an angst, that was it, right? You know, you don't know what the tackling is going to look like game one, and you have to do a really good job and be smart leading up to your games on how much of that you get done. And you know, our players were very, very intentional in drills. You know, we did a lot of tackling within drills, kind of, you know, separate them into their groups and their individual periods, and worked a lot of tackling that way. But to go out and see that type of production live was really promising for us. Yeah, they're a physical football team. You know, they have a lot of guys on that offensive side of the ball that were playmakers that are returning. You know, number 21 is the real deal. This quarterback's going to be a handful. You know, and they're a physical football team. So the one thing I do know is that shouldn't shock us. You know, we got to be prepared and for them to play a physical style of play, and we need to try to match their physicality if we're going to be competitive.
That was the first half of Strand Drayton's weekly Monday presser. It's always interesting to listen to the head coach's thoughts after a game and preparing for the next one. And now it's our time to share our thoughts. Meg, start us off.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start off by acknowledging that he talked about how the halftime talk wasn't some big special speech. He just said what needed to be said to fuel that fire, and that it certainly did. What Drayton said in that locker room clicked for the Owls, and the team that came out of that locker room for the second half was a completely different team. Now, he also mentioned looking forward to next week, Rutgers game. Rutgers is a very physical team, and he made sure to talk about that. Now, Temple is going to have to match them in aggressiveness. If we're not aggressive, then we're going to get buried early on. Rutgers, like Stan was saying, their aggressiveness is always on top. We saw that in the film as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, and, you know, football teams tend to be pretty aggressive, but he really put the emphasis on Rutgers there. And I personally love Coach Drayton's ideology of how he approaches that halftime speech, like you were mentioning, Meg. I mean, you have to go in with a clear thought and not let your emotions get the best of you. Go in with a calculated message, make sure that it's something that the players need to hear, something that's going to motivate them and not just get them angry. And then another thing that he mentioned that I personally love to see during the game was how well they were doing with open field tackles. Those are something that can win you and lose you ball games. That was a huge problem for Temple last year. Their rush defense last year was the third worst in the entire country. That's not exactly good, I'll just put it nicely, but you also have to think about how many stops that they got, because those are short 3-yard gains if you get the tackle, but if that one guy misses in the open field and breaks a tackle or either jukes him out, you're talking about a 50-yard run play.
Absolutely. Now let's take a look at what else Drayton had to say in part 2 of our weekly look. Drayton touches on his veteran players, his team's approach to games, and his concerns with Rutgers heading into week 2.
Jacob Hollins is a guy, probably one of the smartest guys on our defense. You know, he's just a guy who you can tell him something one time and it's going to translate to game rep, and it's going to be done the right way. So he's earned our trust that way quite a bit. And, you know, anytime you have depth with people, talent like Lato and, you know, somebody who's going to get in the game and not hurt you, you know, that's how you build depth, and that's how you win over time. Absolutely. I was very proud of that. You know, we could sit there and respond to a whole lot of things that have absolutely nothing to do with winning football games, and to sit back and chirp back and forth talking smack, that's not going to help us win. You know, so I know we're a chippy group, and I worry about that. And I'm not saying we're perfect in that respect, but to see it happening in the game where they stay focused and kept the task at hand and kept that the main thing is something that we'll build off of. That's indicative of most championship teams, right? They stay focused on the task at hand, and everything else that's distracting them from that, they just kind of wash it out. And especially going into a tough environment at Rutgers, we're going to have that same mindset for sure. Just trying to do right, being competitive. I mean, they had a game plan that was formationally based, and a couple guys, you saw Akron moving, motioning all the time, right? So that team kind of put us in some bad spots, and we had to adjust some calls on the run, and it was just going fast at first for some of those guys for us, and but we're reeling in. Excited that they're doing. They're lined up and they're playing good, sound, fundamental football. They're getting stalemates at the D-line position. They got linebackers coming downhill and tackling well. Their safeties are very, very physical, big size safeties. They just play sound, simple football. I think they've done a good job of keeping the system simple for them so they can execute. And you can tell they know exactly what they're doing within their system. And sometimes that's all you need when you got good personnel.
And that was part 2 of Coach Drayton's weekly presser, and I'll just get right into it. First off, I love the Jacob Hollins love. Hollins was a guy who got inconsistent playing time last year after his injury, and he's just really dedicated. Temple is the fourth school of his college career. He has transferred 3 times so far. You don't go to 4 different schools to play college football unless you are dedicated. Coach Drayton mentioned that he's one of the smartest guys on the team, and that's really saying something when you have a lot of great guys in that locker room. Another thing that was said that I thought was really interesting was that he doesn't think Rutgers' defense did anything exotic. They just had a game plan going in and just stuck to it and went with it. They had the mindset of, hey, we're going to just keep it simple. We think our players are better than yours. We're going to win our one-on-one matchups, and if they get stopped, they get stopped. But obviously, that wasn't the case because they came out with an impressive win, 24-7.
Absolutely. You bring up such a good point, Jake. Stan's saying that Rutgers doesn't need any fancy plays. We heard him say that multiple times, that Rutgers plays sound and simple football. That may be the case, but Temple has not demonstrated from its first game the type of consistency and confidence needed to play this sound and simple football. So it will be interesting to see how it shakes out. Now, on a different note, I appreciate Drayton giving praise to his team for staying focused and locked in and not chirping back to the other team and having their heads in the game. I think that is especially important going into this Rutgers game because this game will be even more than it was with Akron, and they're going to need to stay locked in from the start.
Yeah, Rutgers is an amazing team, and it's also got an amazing atmosphere for its fans, and a night game on the road, 7:30 p.m. is going to be really exciting.
Absolutely. It's time for our second break of the day. When we come back, we'll be taking a peek at Temple's Week 2 opponent, Rutgers, and what the Owls will need to look out for.
Don't you move. Inside the Nest will be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. The nature of college football calls for a lot of roster turnover from year to year. Not only are guys graduating, going to the draft, but the transfer portal opens up so many opportunities as well. I decided to do an in-depth dive into the players who left the team and the ones who joined Temple this season as we get deeper into 2023.
While last year's 3-9 record doesn't indicate it, Temple greatly improved in 2022 in head coach Stan Drayton's first season at the helm. That being said, Temple did lose some very important pieces that they will need to replace this season.
I know they put respect back on this program, and I'll be forever grateful for that senior class, and boy, I would love to have had a W on the board for them. They've done so much that won't get taken for granted.
Some of the biggest leaders on the team and anchors on the offensive line, Adam Klein and Isaac Moore, both graduated. 2 of their top 3 receivers last season, Jose Barbone and Adonicus Sanders, are gone as well. And defensive lineman Darian Varner, who was all-conference first team last season, transferred to Virginia Tech.
While Temple lost a lot of key players from last year's team, they feel like the new players that came in can fill the void that the others left behind. Specifically 2 from Colorado State, Dante Wright and Tywan Francis, who were big in Temple's first win against Akron.
I felt super comfortable. This wasn't our first game setting. We played all some scrimmages. We competed at a high level every day.
Francis is one of 52 new players on the team this season. That's nearly half the entire roster, with 55 players returning from last year. Not to mention, last year's defensive coordinator, DJ Elliott, got a job as the linebackers coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Everett Withers, last year's chief of staff, fills in for Elliott. And despite all of this, Drayton still felt more confident going into week 1 this season compared to last season.
I feel better going into, Akron in year 2 than I did going against Duke year 1. Just you have a firmer sense of the guys who were on the team a year ago still on the team. We know their personalities. We've been to war with some of those guys, and I know how they're going to react when adversity hits.
But enough with the past. Let's look ahead to Temple's next matchup versus the Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
Like Temple, Rutgers won its Week 1 matchup. This game, however, was not nearly as close. Rutgers delivered a Big Ten Conference win in its game against Northwestern on Sunday. The Scarlet Knights quarterback Gavin Wimsatt completed 17 passes for 163 yards. Running back Kyle Munungai rushed for 49 yards, including a 15-yard touchdown. True freshman Jashawn Benjamin rushed for 46 yards, and wide receiver Ian Strong had 24 receiving yards and a touchdown. It's time to roll the tape and take a look at some key plays in Rutgers' win. Rutgers quarterback Gavin Wimsatt does a great job acting quickly under pressure. Here we see him with the play fake and rushing the ball into the end zone. He's quick on his feet. Now on the defensive end, Rutgers had 2 interceptions, which is something Temple will need to watch out for. The Scarlet Knights defense is aggressive and applies lots of pressure, which Temple's offensive line needs to be prepared for as well.
Rutgers is a very familiar foe for Temple. Saturday will mark the 3rd straight season the two have faced off. Last year, Rutgers squeaked out with a victory in Philadelphia. This was E.J. Warner's first ever college football start. In a defensive-heavy battle, Temple could not complete the 4th quarter comeback, losing 16-14. We're getting into our tools for success, and I'm going to start it off with tool number 1. Get the run game going. Like we said earlier in the show, Temple had a rough day trying to run the ball, and they had quite the task ahead of them going against a Rutgers defense that only allowed Northwestern to gain 12 yards on the ground. This was a problem Temple faced last season as well. The Owls had the 3rd worst rushing offense in the country last season, and that was with a strong offensive line that included Adam Klein and Isaac Moore. My second tool, stopping the big plays on defense. The Owls gave up 2 passes of over 50 yards against Akron, one of them going 77 yards and into the end zone. There are a few more deep plays where, had there been a better throw, Akron might have found their way into the end zone again. Coach Drayton said in his news conference both of those plays were due to miscommunication among the defense pre-snap, something that cannot continue as the season moves along.
Tool number 3, consistency. We heard Stan Drayton talk about it in the post-game news conference too. Both the offense and defense need to get off to a faster start. On one end, the offense put together some nice drives, but would then go 4 and out on the next. Vice versa on the defense. Temple would hold Akron to a 3 and out, but then give up a big play in the next drive. And for our final tool for today, protect EJ. Rutgers had 5 sacks and 2 interceptions in the game against Northwestern. Temple's offensive line is going to have to stay focused continuously and make sure it creates space for EJ to get some rushing yards or to connect passes with a little more time. If Temple has another rocky start, the Owls are going to get buried by Rutgers' defense, and that will make it hard to sustain drives.
Now that we have gave our blueprint on what Temple is going to need for the Week 2 game against Rutgers, it's time for the ITN crew to share its predictions on a final score.
Let's send it over to the studio set and introduce our second beat reporter. Hayden Bandel gets first crack at the prediction wheel. Hey, Hayden.
Thanks, guys. This is a Temple team that is walking into an environment that they are not used to. Jake, you said it. Sold out stadium, Saturday night, on the road. With this team, at this point in the season, I don't see the Owls getting the job done. I do think they will keep it close, though. Not to discredit how Rutgers looked on Sunday, but they were going up against Northwestern, one of the worst teams in the Big Ten with all sorts of documented offseason problems. I'm taking Rutgers to win 29-19 over Temple. Now, back to my colleague Sam Cavone, who is still camped out at Edberg Olsen with her game prediction. Hey, Sam.
I agree, Hayden. I also have Rutgers taking the victory 28-21. I believe that this will be an extremely close game with a lot of back and forth action on both sides of the ball. But with Rutgers being undefeated against Temple and both teams showing this past week in their respective games, I cannot see Temple walking out of North Jersey with the win, especially after how slow their start was against Akron. According to the pros who call these games, the Owls are a 10-point underdog and are projected to win by 20%. Now, the big question, what do our hosts think? Guys, it's your turn to go out on a limb.
Thanks, Sam. In case you forgot, last year I went 12-0 on score predictions, and I'm gunning for that title again this year. Unfortunately, I am not predicting a 12-0 season for Temple, however, as I have Rutgers beating Temple 20-14. Last year's Rutgers only won by 2, but that was in Philadelphia with the best crowd of the year for homecoming. Asking a young Temple team to go into Rutgers and come out with a win for not only their first road game, but first night game of the season as well is asking a lot. Although, I wouldn't be too surprised if I was wrong.
Well, I have a little different score prediction than everyone else, but I'm going to go with 34-17 Rutgers. The Owls have a 6-game losing streak against the Scarlet Knights, and I don't see that streak breaking. The Owls were favored to win by 10 against Akron, but they cut that game really close. Rutgers had a strong passing and run game against Northwestern, so I think it's going to be a very challenging game for Temple to win.
If you aren't making the roughly hour drive to Piscataway, New Jersey, you can catch the game on the Big Ten Network on primetime television at 7:30 p.m. IPM beat reporter Hayden Mandel and myself will also be crossing into enemy territory for the game. Follow along with us on social media at Owl Sports Update for live updates.
That's right, another break time. After this, we will go no huddle for the first time this season.
Then ITO's very own Hayden Vandell will be breaking down the rest of the American Athletic Conference. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. It's now time for a fan favorite segment.
That's right, for the first time this season, it's time to go no huddle. Meg, start us off.
All right, for our first question, what position group stood out to you the most from the game against Akron?
I'm going with the receiving group. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to take running back Edward Sadie and tight end David Martin Robinson along with the receivers, but they were all catching passes. We had 5 different Owls get 4+ receptions in the game, and it made E.J. Warner's job a lot easier. Not to mention Dante Wright had a big game as well.
Absolutely. I'm going in the other direction with the linebackers. They had an incredible comeback coming out of that first half. I mean, we heard from Stan talking about how they had that switch, and that is exactly what happened, including Yvonne Rigby. He had 11 solo tackles in week 1, which is tied for the most by any FBS player so far this season in the AAC.
All right, question 2. What position group needs the most improvement for week 2?
I'm going to have to go with the running backs when it comes to this. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We need to run the ball more. Temple needs to run the ball, and they had a total of 61 rushing yards. The Owls need to be more consistent with a run game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, but I'm going to swap to the other side of the ball. I'm going to go with the secondary. Tywan Francis, Jalen McMurray, you're excluded from this criticism, but everybody else needs to step up because those big plays, like I mentioned before, really hurt the defense.
Last question. How many wins will Temple have by the end of the season?
I'm going to go with 6. That would make the Owls bowl eligible for the first time since 2019. I know Temple went 3-9 last season, but I have a lot of faith in them this year.
I'm going to have a similar score prediction, but I'm going with 5, and I just don't think we're going to make the bowl this season. They have improved, but I don't think we're quite there yet. It's now time for our last break of the show.
On the other side, inside the nest, Hayden Bandel is back. He will tell us how the rest of the AAC fared in Week 1. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've talked Temple football all day. Let's shift gears and see what the rest of the AAC is doing.
Inside the Nest reporter Hayden Bandel is live on set with us to fill us in. Hey, Hayden.
Thanks, guys. For the first time since the American Athletic Conference veered off from its East and West divisions, a total of 5 different programs received at least one first-place vote. The reigning champion Green Wave received 20 of the 34 first-place votes and are favored to win the revamped conference this season. Now, you don't get to say this too often, but selected to come in second is another conference champion from the previous season. The UTSA Roadrunners won the Conference USA the past 2 seasons and can accomplish a rare feat by becoming conference champions in back-to-back seasons in 2 different conferences. This would be the first time in AAC history this feat is accomplished. Rounding out the rest of the first-place votes are SMU, Memphis, and UAB. Now that the 2023 season is underway, let's take a look at some of the scores from around the American. There was a pair of teams that hit the road to play a ranked opponent. ECU fell to the number 2 team in the country at Michigan, who was without head coach Jim Harbaugh. Rice was defeated by its in-state opponent, the Texas Longhorns, by a score of 37-10. The only ranked team in the American is Tulane at 24, who stomped all over South Alabama 37-17. We're keeping it in the state of Texas and a showdown. The Houston Cougars held off UTSA behind transfer Donovan Smith's 2 passing touchdown. Houston tops Texas San Antonio 17-14. Memphis had a win margin of 42 points, the largest margin of victory by any American team in Week 1. The Tigers put up 56 points against Bethune-Cookman from out of the SWAC conference. In his first game in a Tiger uniform, 5th-year Blake Watson found the end zone 3 different times. SMU, Charlotte, and FAU also started off on the right foot with the win, and USF and North Texas started in the loss column. Now, that is all that I have this week for Around the American. Jake and Meg, back to you guys at the desk.
Thank you, Hayden. That will do it for our first edition of Inside the Nest this season. We hope you have a wonderful week ahead, and be sure to keep up with us on socials, including the game coming up this Saturday.
Yep, I'll be heading down to North Jersey with Hayden, and we'll have complete coverage from New Brunswick all day on Saturday. For us, our 2 show producers, Chloe Gessing and Jacob Smedley, along with the entire crew, have a safe day. We will see you next Tuesday at noon.